Tomorrow there will be a press conference by the Galileo Project, which is a multi-million-dollar backed effort to investigate UAP, headed by Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard University. And after that, there's going to be a discussion on Dr. Brian Keating's YouTube channel with some of the leaders from that project. So that is going to be really, really exciting. And I'm definitely going to watch that presentation. Dr. Keating put out a YouTube video yesterday talking about what's coming, and I'm going to take the liberty to show you that with the intention of getting my audience to go over to his channel tomorrow to actually watch the discussion that's going to take place with the leaders from the Galileo Project. So I encourage all of my audience to watch that and to become informed and educated on what the Galileo Project is all about, because as a part of the world community that sees UAP as a scientific mystery worthy of investigating, I think it's important to appraise ourselves of exactly what this encompasses. So here's Dr. Brian Keating telling us what's going to happen tomorrow, July 26th.
Hey guys, I got big news coming out this Monday, the 26th of July at 7 a.m. Eastern. There's going to be a big press conference involving the search for extraterrestrial alien technosignatures and also microbial or biosignatures. I am pleased to be the source for breaking news, the first podcast with the leaders of this new endeavor, backed by millions of dollars in private funding, to look into the case of the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, which, as you know, has been interesting me and many scientists for the last several years, and more intensely since the June Pentagon report came out, as ambiguous as it was. So tune in Monday on this channel. There'll be a special podcast with breaking news right after a press conference is held and more details to follow.
The Galileo Project is of such enormous significance that I'm going to link below the YouTube channel of the Galileo Project, in which the press conference is going to take place, as well as Dr. Brian Keating's channel, in which the discussion after the press conference is going to take place. And I'm going to put that directly under the description because I perceive this as being of enormous significance, to say the very least. Now I want to move into my assessment. And my assessment is potentially slightly controversial, particularly from a lot of people that are within academia and the scientific community. Many of them would disagree with me on that, which is fine. So let's boil this down to the Socratic method, and I will give you my personal assessment of the situation, and you can have a rebuttal if you wish. I believe that the game has already been over for a very long time. What do I mean by that? I believe the U.S. government, and probably other governments as well, most likely, has scientific proof of technology in our airspace and in our oceans that does not originate from human society. And when I say scientific proof, I'm talking about the highest level of epistemology, repetition, and multiple sensor units getting the same readings over and over and over again. And that's my personal assessment. And I will tell you that this assessment of mine disturbs me deeply, because it's not just about lights in the sky. It's not just about the UFOs. UFOs are going to do what they're going to do. They're there, whatever they are and wherever they originate from. It's about living in a democratic society and expecting your government to fulfill the agreements made by living in a democratic society. So, for example, if citizens want to be told the truth about UFOs and don't want to be misled, then that should be reciprocated by the government that serves the citizenry of the United States. And I don't think that's happening, and I don't think that's happened for a very long time. And while we're making progress, I still assess that the U.S. government knows so much more than they've revealed, to the extent that they know our place in the universe is beyond just humanity. There is some other intelligence, or intelligence is engaging this planet, and they know it, in my opinion. Now, I grant you, it's a very small number of people within the U.S. government. The U.S. government's not a monolith. It's highly compartmentalized, so it's a very complicated situation. But are there people in our government that know? I believe the answer is yes. And it disturbs me because I think it's a betrayal of our democracy. And it has tyrannical overtones, frankly, and it bothers me very much. And, I always get a kick out of people making fun of people who want disclosure. Oh, disclosure, we're never going to get it. Look at this guy over here. What a nerd. He wants disclosure. Well, I want to hold my government accountable. And I think that's a reasonable enthusiasm to have, to hold your government accountable. I think they should tell us the truth of what they know about UAP. For the longest time, they told us they weren't studying UAP, and then the former head of ATIP resigns from the Pentagon and informs his fellow Americans that that's simply not the case. And we all suspected that. We all suspected that the government never desisted from studying this enigma. And I will go so far to tell you that I assess, or I believe, I can't prove it, but I believe that there are other programs inside the U.S. government, legacy programs, highly funded, way more funded than ATIP, that are studying UAP to this very day. Now, I'm going to show you a clip from the Sarah Carter podcast in which Elizondo talks about the level of knowledge the U.S. government has had about this enigma and how far back it goes.
You're talking about something that is accelerating well beyond anything that we know technologically can do.
And we have that documented, correct? We have that documented.
Absolutely, we do. And it's on radar. And we've had this actually. The scary thing is we've had this data since going back to the 1950s, but that's another story.
So there, Elizondo stated that this data of anomalous vehicles goes back to the 50s. And one of the reasons this is so significant is that our sensor data collecting mechanisms are getting better yearly, and certainly with each decade. So they were getting that data back in the 50s. You can only imagine the level of fidelity that they have now. It's mind-boggling. And I think a lot of people just want to sort of rest on the assessment that, well, look back to the history of the United States government. There's been tons of crackpots. Human beings are fallible. Who cares what Elizondo says? And I think that's a very huge mistaken way to approach the situation. It's lazy, number one. And number two, I don't think it's intelligent because it's not so black and white. First of all, according to journalists Ralph Blumenthal and George Knapp, they have both seen his evaluations from the time where he worked in the Pentagon, and his evaluations were at the highest level in terms of his competence at his various jobs that he had while working in the DoD. Second of all, when he did work in the DoD, he was entrusted with some of the most sensitive secrets the U.S. government has. He was part of oversight responsibilities for special access programs, and that, I believe, can be fully and completely verified. So it's not an opinion, it's a fact. So just looking at his job record, we can't just assume the guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's lying, or he's a fantasist, or he's incompetent. We don't have the luxury to do that. And so when Elizondo tells us these things about what the government knows and has known about UAP, our alarm bells should be going off. Not necessarily to believe him 100%, because you probably shouldn't believe anyone unless you can see the proof yourself at least 100%. But to me, the only appropriate response at this point is to have suspicion that he might be completely accurate and to be concerned by that. That to me seems like the logical, reasonable response to someone like Lou Elizondo coming out of the Department of Defense and telling us what he's telling us. And that should not be seen in an isolated fashion, because it's not isolated. He's not an island unto himself. We have 70 years of history. We have documents that have been obtained from Freedom of Information Act. We have sightings that have been highly corroborated with people seeing objects maneuver in ways that fulfill some or many of the 5 observables. We have very recently aviators coming forward talking about what they've seen, what they've experienced. I don't understand the response to this. I don't understand people just feeling comfortable with assuming that all of these people are either lying, they're fantasists, or they're incompetent. I don't understand that approach to reality. I think it's irresponsible. I think it's foolish. I think the stakes are extremely high. And I think the only reasonable response to what's going on now and what's been going on for decades is to have suspicion. Suspicion that there's a lot more to this, that the government knows a lot more, that the aerospace companies they've contracted to study this phenomena knows a lot more scientifically. And that's a problem. It's a problem for them to classify the very existence of this phenomena, right? It's understandable for them not to give us information that would compromise the safety and the security of this nation. But what's not understandable is what I think has been going on for a very long time, which is they've classified the very existence of this phenomena, that it's real, that it doesn't stem from human society, that it stems from some other intelligence. In alignment with my assessment that there is data out there proving that there are machines of unknown origin maneuvering in ways that are beyond any known technology. Here's a clip from a presentation done with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, in which David Fravor talks about a radar tape that no one else has seen from, I believe, Chad Underwood's plane when he was within about 20 miles of the Tic Tac. And this would be further data that nobody has seen that further corroborates that the Tic Tac is a true mystery.
That's the tape that no one has seen. I have a lot. And this is one of those things, like everyone knows where they're at. I hate to say it, but 9/11, if you were alive back then, you know exactly what you're doing on that day. This is one of those days for me. I mean, I know exactly what was going on. It's very clear because it's like one of the weirdest things you're ever going to happen to you. So when you see that and it's jamming, that's when he gets the passive track, and that's the minute and 30 seconds that you see.
What tape did you see that nobody's seen?
The radar tape. The radar tape off of the airplane that took the video.
So far, I've shared testimony from Elizondo, and we've heard a lot of testimony from him within the past 3.5 years. I just shared with you testimony from Top Gun graduate David Fravor, and we've heard a lot of testimony from him that's been corroborated by other aviators that were in the sky during the Tic Tac UAP intercept, and I don't need to rehash that story. Suffice to say that the Tic Tac maneuvered in ways that are well beyond known technology according to the aviators. And in fact, the UFO report, in my opinion, alludes to that, frankly, if you read between the lines, but in some ways explicitly. And remember, the UFO report is preliminary. I want to add another person to that pile, if you will, that tells us that there's really something to this UFO issue. Remember, I told you that Elizondo is not isolated. He's not. And this is a drop in the bucket, what I'm sharing with you right now. I want to share the story from 1964. that now Dr. Bob Jacobs has told. Now, his title is, at the time, was Officer in Charge of Photo Instrumentation. And it's called the Big Sur event. Bob Jacobs was filming or using a camera system to record test launches of a missile. And his recording apparatus could get very high fidelity footage of the test missile. And at the time that he was filming it in 1964, he wasn't able to actually see what the camera was filming. And because the missile was so far away, he couldn't see it with the naked eye. But the next day, he was called in by his superior, Major Mansman, who was assigned to the office of the Chief Scientist's 1st Strategic Aerospace Division. His role was a photo interpreter, and he routinely analyzed the motion picture films of the missile tests. So he was brought in, and Major Mansman showed him some footage from that test launch. And it was at the end of the recording that was so bizarre. Major Mansman asked him, "What were you doing up there? Were you messing around?" Because what the video showed, according to both Major Mansman and Bob Jacobs, was a saucer-shaped object came into the picture and traveled at the same velocity as the missile, several thousand miles an hour, circled the missile while shooting some sort of beam at it of unknown science. At one point, Major Mansman said it looked like lightning, so we don't know exactly what it was. We don't have that technology. After being hit 4 times with whatever that beam was, according to them, the warhead fell out of the scene of the footage and missed its target downrange. And Major Mansman's like, "So what do you think that is?" And Bob Jacobs said, "Looks like we got ourselves a UFO." To which Major Mansman said, "You're not permitted to repeat that. It's classified." Well, he didn't say it was classified. He just said that you're not permitted to repeat it. And there were 2 other gentlemen in that place, dressed in civilian suits, that were identified as coming from the CIA. And what's interesting about this case is it's corroborated by both Major Mansman and Bob Jacobs. And furthermore, that Major Mansman saw that footage allegedly under a magnifying glass, frame by frame. And here is what he stated regarding what he saw. This is a quote, I believe. "Details would be sketchy and from memory. The shape was a classic disc. The center seemed to be a raised bubble. The entire lower saucer shape was glowing and seemed to be rotating slowly. At the point of beam release, if it was a beam, the object, turned like an object required to be in a position to fire from a platform. But again, this could be my own assumption from being in aerial combat." It's from this experience happened in 1964. I mean, what makes this significant partly is the fact that, according to Mansman, he looked at this film frame by frame with a magnifying glass, okay? So it's one thing to say you saw something in the sky and maybe you kind of misremembered it or you misidentified it. It's quite another to say you looked at film frame by frame under a magnifying glass and you misidentified it. You done messed up. Now, I'm not saying this is proof of anything. What I'm saying is this is a classic piece of UFO history, where people of high credibility, seemingly sane and composed are telling us they've seen the forensic data proving this phenomena. Now, if this film actually exists, which I personally believe that it does, then the game is over. And it's been over since 1964. I mean, this is not hard. If they have this level of fidelity where you could look at it frame from frame with a magnifying glass, there was something that was able to come out of nowhere, of unknown origin, circulate around a test missile at several thousands of miles an hour. I believe it was at the edge of space, and shoot some kind of beam out of it, and the warhead tumbles out of the frame. Well, guess what? We're not alone. I mean, it's really that simple. So my point is that epistemologically, this is not proof of anything, and I would agree with that. On the other hand, it's enough information to where you're going off the deep end, in my opinion, if you're just going to assume that this is just a story, everybody. David Fravor, what he said and the other aviators stated on the record, just a story. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. What Elizondo has stated, he's seen, don't worry about it. He's incompetent. The guy is loony. Right? He's a very fallible person. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. Just let it all drop by the wayside. We don't need to perceive and view these statements made by credible people and use that to pressure our government. Let's just assume the probability is near 0%. They know what they're talking about and they're accurate in their rendition. This kind of attitude has been promoted, has been respected, and has been sort of the status quo amongst our institutions and our scientific and academic communities and journalistic communities. So forth. And all I see is pure madness. Pure, unadulterated madness. There's just too much history behind this subject. There's too much testimony. And just because I can't show you what, for example, David Fravor said he saw with his own eyes, and just because I can't show you what Major Mansman and Bob Jacobs said they saw with their own eyes, and just because I wasn't there with David Fravor and Alex Dietrich and so forth when they claim they saw something spectacular, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means it's not proof. But let's not conflate lacking proof with assuming it doesn't exist. That's foolhardy. Doesn't make any sense. So my point is that you should be suspicious. There's a lot more to this. Okay? How suspicious you want to get is up to you. And I believe there is a sliding scale of reasonableness to respond to the evidence. But what is not reasonable, in my subjective opinion, is just assuming that everyone that has come forward over the past 70 years doesn't know what they're talking about. They misidentified, they're wrong, they're fantasists, and so forth. That is not valid. It's not. It's ridiculous, and it needs to be called out as ridiculous. So the point of this video was twofold. Firstly, it was to promote education and staying in the loop on what the Galileo Project is up to and what they're going to do and how they're going to scientifically investigate UFOs, something I support, overwhelmingly so. But it was also to extend my opinion that it's already known in certain quadrants of our civilization that we are not alone. It's just my opinion. Now, I do disagree with Professor Avi Loeb. He did state on the Michael Mataluni podcast that he doesn't agree with the approach of trying to get the evidence from the government. We got to do it ourselves. Now, I disagree with Avi Loeb only in that I think we should do both. I think we should pressure our government to be more forthcoming with us about what they know about this phenomena, but it's also absolutely essential to investigate it scientifically on our own. They're not mutually exclusive. And nevertheless, it really doesn't matter that I disagree with Avi Loeb regarding this, because he is doing something extremely historic, and it needs to be and it should be applauded. And I will tell you this. Do you really think that a project like this would have gotten off the ground prior to December 16th, 2017, when the New York Times article was published and all that has taken place since then? And recall that Dr. Brian Keating even stated in that clip I showed you that he's been interested, as well as others with him, in this subject for the past few years, and especially so with the release of the UFO report. I think that's all you need to hear to understand how the past few years have changed the climate on how academia, science, and journalism has responded to this phenomena. And that's wonderful and necessary. And I'm very excited. And I believe that in our lifetimes, we will know the truth, that we are not alone, that we are being engaged by non-human intelligence. And that's my assessment. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But at the end of the day, I have to call it like I see it and be a voice promoting my perspective, my analysis, even if our institutions and our journalists may disagree with me. That's not a good reason for me not to loudly voice my assessment, because as history has shown in the past, our institutions are not always right. And I think this was one of those times where they were wrong. And I think that my analysis will be demonstrated as true scientifically in the not too distant future, but we'll see. And if I'm wrong, well then critique me and use me as an example of how not to go about a mystery. Use me as an example of how my logic and my reasoning was so problematic and deficient and illogical. Go ahead and do it. I give you permission. Hell, I'll do it with you, frankly. I'll do it with you. If, like let me give you an example, because I know the response is going to be, well, how are you going to prove that you were wrong? Well, right, you can't. That would be pretty hard to do. But what could happen is if 10 years from now, nothing comes of this, right? For example, the U.S. government doesn't move beyond where they have now in terms of acknowledgement of this phenomenon. That would be suspicious, in my opinion. With all the pressure and the sea change happening, I would say that's suspicious in terms of, maybe I was wrong, but I don't expect that. I think, as I've famously said many times in the past, the house of cards is falling, baby. Long video. Please accept my apologies. I don't usually like to make videos like this where I kind of just talk and talk. I generally like to keep it very concise and news oriented, but let's try something different, and I'll see how this video performs. But exciting times, really exciting times. And I look forward to watching the press release of the Project Galileo tomorrow on their YouTube channel, and going to Dr. Keating's YouTube channel and hearing what the leaders of that project have to say about what's to come. Very exciting times. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Do not forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my Patreon. You can check out my YouTube membership. You can check out my merch shop, or you can even give me a one-time donation. All of those possibilities are in the description below, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I'd appreciate it so much. As to why I'm talking in such a low tone right now, I honestly have no idea, but that's what's coming out of me right now. Thank you, and see you in the next episode. Oh, and by the way, if you've watched this whole thing through, please put in the comment section below water, just so that I can be amazed by the fact that you stuck with me for such a long time. Thanks. Special thanks to all YouTube members, patrons, those who have bought merch, those who have given me donations, and those who watched this video. I'm really grateful. Thank you.